Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Estonia once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip over there. So for this one we're going to have a look at a beer from another brewery I've never tried anything from before. These guys are supposed to do some very nice beers, and I saw quite a few of them over there, but this is the one that really kind of caught my eye because it is my native beer style. So for this one then we are going to go to Anderson's Craft Beer for the first time, who started out as a gypsy brewery but now operate down in Tartu in the southeast of the country, and today we're having a taste of the Duncan. So this one comes in at 7.3% ABV, and it is a Scotch ale, or wee heavy as the Americans might call it, although back home in Scotland we would call these beers shilling beers, of course. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. This is the first example of a Scotch ale that I'm reviewing for you here on the channel from Estonia. I have had a taste of one from Pojala, of course, and you will see that beer reviewed a little bit later on. But yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. Always nice to introduce new Estonian craft breweries for you here on the channel as well. As I've told you in other videos, the Estonian beer scene is one that I regard very highly. The quality of their beers really is great actually. So if you get the chance to try some Estonian beers, I would highly recommend that you do. And this is a brewery who come highly recommended from a lot of the Estonians that I was speaking to. So yeah, curious to see how this one turns out, as I said, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we get on then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Anderson's Craft Beer. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, and this I think was the only one that I brought back with me on this trip, but we will be back to Estonia as I said. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Estonian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I've still got a lot of beers left. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Anderson's Craft Beer then, on to my brewery notes. So Anderson's Craft Beer was founded back in 2014 by Sten Andersson and Tano Pikand. So Sten comes from a background in the IT sector, but he just lost his job, so he decided he wanted to start his own brewery and make a career of his home brewing hobby, which he'd been doing for a couple of years. Tano also came from a background in the IT sector, but from what I understand he was involved in like quality assurance and product design engineering and stuff like this. So they went for it and they drew up their business plan and everything like that, and they started brewing their beers at Genica Ulmestrid, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They started gypsy brewing their beers at Genica, but they also started to brew a little bit later at Tanker and then also at Lehe Prulikoda as well. So they were brewing mainly in the Tallinn area in the northwest of Estonia at that point. But they continued to gypsy brew over the following years. They brewed more and more beer each year from what I understand, but they also started to brew some beers at Puaste and Kebliku, who are down closer to, well, Puaste are in Tartu itself, and then Kebliku are a little bit south of Tartu. I forget the name of the actual place there, but yeah, they started brewing more beers in the southeast of Estonia as well. But a little bit later on in 2019, Matti Luik and Anton Messi joined the company as partners, and then the brewery secured a location in an old metal fabrication factory in Tartu on Teia Street, which is just down the road from Puaste Prulikoda actually. But prior to founding their own location, or founded their own facility, the brewery had been producing around 25,000 litres per year at maximum, but with the new brewery they started off with an initial capacity of around 180,000 litres, which is basically an upscale of around 7 times, something like that. But the brewery started producing in early 2020, and the focus at the moment is on hiring new personnel to kind of help in the day-to-day running of the brewing operations, because from what I understand all of the 4 owning partners, if you like, do still do their regular kind of day jobs. But as of November 2020, when I'm producing this review for you, these guys have produced around 65 different kinds of beer, and they are, as I say, quite well respected in Estonia. So yeah, definitely a brewery that you need to check out. Over the next little while you will start to see their beers appearing in cans if you haven't already. But yeah, they have got a canning line in this new brewery, so they will be producing a lot more of their own beers. and you will be seeing those in cans as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Anderson's Craft Beer for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, this one I think should be pretty cool. As I said, I always enjoy reviewing my native beer style from different places, and this is the first one that you'll be seeing from Estonia as well. Actually, I've reviewed Scotch ales from really random places like Chile, Brazil, you know, Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, you would kind of expect it there, from Japan as well. Actually, that's been pretty interesting. So yeah, the first Estonian Scotch ale. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. As you can see on the artwork there is the sort of teardrop shape that you'll see for Anderson's Craft Beer. I think it's a really cool design actually. The name Anderson's of course is derived from Sten Anderson, who is the main man behind the brewing side of things from what I understand. Yeah, 7.3% ABV this one. It says on the side here, malty, caramelly and slightly peaty ale. Yeah, it looks very, very nice. I do wonder why they chose the name Duncan. You know, there were a few Scottish kings that were called Duncan. It maybe could be a reference to Duncan Ferguson, who used to play for Everton, who was a bit of a beast actually. Duncan Ferguson was a really good player in the era. I always used to enjoy watching him as a youngster. But there you can see on the side here is also the symbol of the Estonian Craft Beer Partnership. But yeah, plain black bottle cap on this one. Does it say where this beer was brewed? No, it doesn't actually. It doesn't say which brewery it was brewed at. But yeah, I think I'll probably be keeping this bottle for the decoration in my background when I do move apartments. So yeah, nicely presented beer. This one is 7.3% Scotch ale. Without further ado, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting then. Is it going to behave itself? Yes, it is. You always have to be careful with that with some of these beers. Sometimes they can explode and just go a little bit mental. And when this beer has a little bit of Scottish in it, then, you know, probably going a bit mental is not out of the question. But yeah, as I would just need to be careful with this one on the pour by the looks of it. But yeah, as I was saying to you, as I've said to you in previous reviews of Scotch ales, the term Scotch ale wee heavy is something that was coined by the Americans when they took this beer style over to the States. In Scotland we would use the shilling system, and you'll see that denoted by like a sort of forward slash and a dash. And basically we had beers that went from 40 shilling all the way up to 90 shilling in 10 intervals. You will sometimes get a 160 shilling as well. But basically shilling was the unit of currency that was used before they decimalised and used pence. But essentially, let me just get the last of this in. There you are, that's a nice pour actually. But yeah, what happened was there was a tax on the malt content of beer, so you would start off at 40 shilling and that was the lowest malt content, and as you went up 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, then you would you would have more malt content of the beer, thus more alcohol, and so you would pay more tax. As I said, you also get a 160 shilling, although that was not as common, but basically as you went up the scale the beers got more malty, more sweet and just stronger basically. Most of the beers that are referred to as wee heavies these days are sort of 80, 90 shillings, although I guess in some cases you maybe could argue that those are 160s. The 160s were just the kind of big beasts actually. I mean, Tracker House Brewery, back home in Scotland, they do a 160 shilling beer, which is very, very nice actually. I would recommend that you try that. But yeah, most of the beers that you'll find from foreign breweries that are brewing Scotch ales tend to be the 80, 90 shilling ones, although one exception to that would be the Robert the Bruce that I had from Three Floyds over in America. That was more like a sort of 50 or 60 shilling beer from what I remember. So yeah, as I say, that's the term that was coined by the Americans, and I think that improves, or that that explains the shilling system fairly well. But yeah, so during this review we will talk about exactly what shilling this beer should be, where in the shilling system this beer would fit in. But I have to say, that is extremely dark. That's one of the darkest Scotch ales I can think that I've come across. It certainly has the colour of about a 160 shilling, that's for sure. So you can see the head on this one as well. That's poured, we can see when we open this up, it's poured with about a 1 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say very kind of fair, very kind of fair, very, very light beige, fawn coloured head actually. That's probably fair to say. The carbonation, you can see it is actually gathering on the bottom of the head there, so maybe when we start drinking it the head will start to kind of dissipate a little bit. But yeah, it's probably just been sitting in the bottle a little bit, and I'm guessing, yeah, this is bottle conditioned. There's a bit of sediment in there. So yeah, it is a bottle conditioned beer. I'm just hoping that it's not overly carbonated, but we'll need to see. But yeah, it certainly looks very, very nice. But in terms of its colour, if we shine the light through this, it's a very dark, it does have a little bit of a ruby tint to it, but it's a very dark, sort of rosewoody type colour, this beer. As you can see, there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but you can see that the carbonation is quite active in going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look very, very nice actually. So yeah, it's kind of what you'd expect, but this is definitely one of the darker examples of a Scotch ale that I've come across before. Remember, the two things that determine the colour of your beer: one, the type of malts; two, the length of the boil. And Scotch ales, I think, do tend to undergo quite a long boil, to be honest with you. So the longer you boil the beer, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour to your beer. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on. Ooh, that is very, very nice. I'm going to say straight away, this reminds me of the old parochial from Tempest Brewery back home in Scotland, and that's one of the best Scottish brewed, I think it probably is the best Scottish brewed Scotch ale that I've come across from one of the modern breweries. The other one would be the 160 shilling from Track Your House. That's a beautiful, beautiful beer. Dogma from Brewdog was always a very good one as well. I always used to like that, but that disappeared unfortunately. I think it's now been replaced by Caramel Carousel, or King Shilling, I believe it's known as. But yeah, it depends what country you're in, which how that beer is referred to. But yeah, the aroma of this one is lovely. Straight away you're going to notice that nice big smoky peaty note out of it. And if you've watched the channel before, you will know that I'm a sucker for smoke. I love the German Rauch beers and I love the Scottish peat malts as well. So the main difference between those, of course, would be the German malts are more kind of meaty, whereas the Scottish ones are a little bit more kind of earthy and grassy, if you like. But this one actually does have a wee bit of it does actually have a wee bit of that German meatiness to it as well, which is quite interesting. So maybe they're using a little bit of Bamberg Rauch malt and also a little bit of Scottish peated malt as well, because at the top of the nose you really get the meaty German qualities to it, but you also get the kind of earthy peaty kind of things in there as well. So yeah, there's a lot, I will say straight away, there is a lot going on in the aroma of this beer, and I really, really like how it goes together. So this one will take just a little bit of time to go through actually. I really like how this how it all goes together. So I mean, yeah. With this beer then, the kind of smoky, peaty, meaty notes, they form the backbone of this beer. On top of that, you do have a little bit of a kind of brown bready sort of thing. It's difficult to pick out whether it's like a German rye bread and it's quite sweet, but you do get a wee bit of that kind of brown bready sort of thing in there. You would expect that from the Scotch ale, of course, but there's really highly caramelised brown sugars in this, you know, big treacle molasses, 100%. Yeah, brown bready notes, like I say, big treacle molasses qualities. You do get a bit of a roasty, toasty brown sugar in there. You've got a wee bit of a sweet caramel, as I said, and you know, a wee bit of a sweet caramel, like I said, and you also have some really nice, you really have a very, very nice kind of, how would you say, brain's not working, you just get a nice little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing out of this. But yeah, the two dominant aromas in the malty side of this beer are 100% the big, highly caramelised brown sugars, and two, the kind of peaty and Rauch malty, kind of smoky elements to the beer. I really like how this, I really like how it kind of goes together actually. I mean, it is very, very, it is really quite nice how that malty side of this beer goes together. So in terms of Scotch ales, this one is very well done. On the basis of the aroma, I would say it comes across as being like 160 shilling. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect. You get a little bit of earthiness out of it. You do get a wee bit of a kind of floral aromaticity, but not a lot on that. It does have a bit of a grassiness. But the fruits, I think, the thing with Scotch ales is these can sit for a long time and the hoppy characters will drop, but the fruits are where this one really kind of shows its colour, if you like. So for me, you've got quite a bit of a kind of dark plummy note to this one. and a wee bit of fig, but I think the thing that really takes the fore with this beer, you've got a lot of blackcurrant and blackberry coming out of this one. I'm really not sure exactly what hop they might have used in this. With it being Estonian, I mean, they could use an American hop. They might use a little bit of Bramling's Cross, or maybe even some German Northern Brewer, which is a very popular hop in the you know, it's a very popular hop that in Doppelbocks and things like that, because there is something a little bit kind of Doppelbocky about this beer. It does have a bit of German character to it, this Scotch ale, I think, and there's nothing wrong with that. The German Doppelbocks, of course, are another favourite style of mine. But yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy that aroma, but to me it's really nicely done. Interesting depth to the malts in there. You get that nice peaty note with a bit of earthiness and grassiness, as I said. You get the more meaty kind of Rauch malts, the sort of German type malts. Bit of brown bread, good bit of treacle and molasses, bit of a sweeter caramel, some McVitie's digestive biscuits, but that's quite minimal. Quite a toasty brown sugar note sitting on top there as well. A little bit of earthy hop, little bit of floral notes, but quite grassy, and then otherwise you've got these lovely fruity notes that we've just mentioned. So yeah, interesting aroma coming out of this one, so thumbs up to them for that. Let's have a taste of this beer then and see how we get on. So this one is the Duncan Scotch Ale, wee heavy, however you want to call it, from Anderson's Craft Brewery. Originally started as a gypsy brewery in Tallinn, but now based in Tartu in the southeast of Estonia. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanja Skål till every six. Yeah, that's really nice actually. It's very well done. I will say straight away, I mean, as you can tell from the head, the beer is slightly over carbonated, but that's a risk you always run when it comes. It's a risk that you always run when it comes to bottle conditioned beers. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. The flavour composition of this beer is very nice done, and I will say it's got a bit of a kick to it. So this is most definitely either a 90 shilling. It's most definitely a 90 shilling or a 160 shilling. This beer is a bit of a beast. But yeah, I'm just going to say straight away to Anderson's. Very nicely done on this. It's a really interesting interpretation of the style. It strikes me as being one of the slightly drier Scotch ales that I've had actually. It's got a lovely smoothness to it. You will find the dryness with this beer kind of pushes on into the aftertaste a little bit, and I really like how that goes together in this one. So I mean, yeah, where to start? Where to go with this beer? So yeah, the backbone of this beer I think is really quite nice. So straight away you do get a little bit of a kind of toasty bread crusty note just forming the backbone of this beer on the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate. It does have a little bit of kind of bready smoothness in there as well. So you've got that bread crusty note, you've got the bready smoothness, but the kind of smoky and peaty elements there, they're kind of infused into that whole bready base there. So in the middle third of your palate, I think, infused throughout the whole thing, you do get a nice, you get the more kind of earthy, peaty notes out of this beer. I would say that in the flavour, this one definitely comes across as more earthy and peaty than it does in the aroma, because you do get a bit of that German Rauch malty quality in the aroma, as I mentioned. Yeah, so the kind of peaty malts, they're just infused in the middle of your palate and towards the back third of your palate. You can feel those nice, smooth, peaty, earthy qualities just coming out of this one. It does give you a little bit of grassiness, I think, the further you go into the aftertaste as well. But for me, there is definitely, as the flavour develops, you do start to get that, a little bit of a kind of Rauch malty. You do start to get a nice kind of Rauch malty quality out of this one, which is quite... It's interesting. That just develops further into the aftertaste. You can feel it in the middle third of your palate. You start to get that more meaty German Rauch malty note out of this one, and we're only talking about the backbone of the beer so far. This beer's got a hell of a lot of complexity to it. But yeah, that's in the middle third of your palate. You get that nice sort of smooth, peaty, smoky earthiness to it. Then you get a good little bit of then you start to get the meaty notes a bit later. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. But yeah, like I say, if you go towards the back third of your palate, you get a wee touch of, you do get a little bit more of a kind of dryness on the palate of this beer. You do get a little bit of the more kind of grainy sides of it, but overall the backbone of the beer is very, very smooth. But yeah, as you go into the sort of the middle third of your palate, you can feel on the back third of your palate the breadiness does thicken up a little bit, but as you go into the middle third of your palate, the thickness just drops away, and on top of that kind of meaty note you're talking about, you do get a nice kind of brown sugary layer out of this one. Yeah, you do get a nice little kind of brown sugary quality out of this one. Straight away with this beer though, you're going to notice it is highly caramelised. It's got a lot of kind of treacly notes to it, but again, as you go further into the aftertaste with this beer, it opens up a little bit. In the very set, you're going to notice it has that dark kind of brown sugary layer at the bottom. Then sitting on top of it, you start to get the kind of sweeter elements out of it, which are really interesting. There's a bit of a dry, toasty kind of brown sugar in there, then a little sweet brown sugary quality there as well. But I mean, it's really nice. This it's quite the brown sugars have a lot of complexity to them, as I say. Highly caramelised, treacly, molasses sort of things on top of that, some nice sweet caramelly notes, and you've also got a good little bit of a toasty, dry brown sugar element in there as well. But if you go to the front corners of your palate, then move diagonally back, you've got a nice you do have a nice little bit of a kind of woody kind of thing in there as well, which is quite nice. You do get a little one or two kind of nutty elements building out this beer. If you go to the very centre of your palate and then move forward, you start to get some nutty qualities out of this beer. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together. So yeah, this one, it does come across, this beer, it really sweetens up the further you go into the aftertaste as well, so it's got a really smooth and slightly dry backbone to it, but it really does sweeten up. There's a lot of depth to this beer, so it takes a little while for it to open up, but I think we've covered the malty side of it quite well now and explained it. It's really nicely done. As I say, it's quite different to other Scotch ales that I've come across, but you're going to get that when you try the different beers from different countries. But it is nicely done, so thumbs up to Anderson for this. I really like this. So yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there, which is what you'd expect. As you move further forward along the sides of the palate, it's a little bit more, you do get a little bit of a kind of herbal quality there. Then as you reach the front kind of corners of the palate, you do get a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity. Then round the very front curve of the tongue, you get a little bit of a lighter sort of grassiness out of the beer, and I do like how that goes together. In terms of the the hoppy side of things, I do think this is maybe a mix of English and German hops that's in here. I wouldn't be surprised if it's either of Northern Brewer or Bramling's Cross that's in this. Bramling's Cross, of course, is popular in England for barley wines and stuff. Northern Brewer is popular in Germany for Doppelbock. Something like that that's in this one. So yeah, let's look at the fruity side of the beer then. So yeah, on the front third of your palate then, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. One thing I will say is that you can feel this kind of the sort of peaty notes just pushing their way forward underneath the fruity side of the beer on that front third of your palate. But if you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a really nice kind of plummy note to the beer. You do get a wee bit of a you do have a kind of raisiny note to it in the beginning as well. But yeah, nice juicy plums. As you move further forward along the front third of your palate, you get a more kind of juicy figgy sort of thing, and then on the front third of your palate you do get that, on the front half of that front third of your tongue, you get a nice oily blackcurranty, blackberry sort of thing. So yeah, I really like how that goes together. You do get a bit more of the juicy blackcurrant in the beginning, I think, but then it really starts to lean more towards a kind of more oily blackberry sort of flavour further on. So yeah, it's got a really, as I say, it's got a very interesting kind of composition of flavour to it, this one. I really like how how that goes together. So it gets a thumbs up from me in terms of its flavour composition. Like I say, it's quite different from other Scotch ales I've had. This is definitely one of the kind of smoother and almost, I hesitate to say breadier, but it's definitely one of the kind of smoother Scotch ales that I've had in recent times. It's definitely got a little bit more, it's got a little bit more of the yeasty component coming out of it, which I think is interesting, but that could well just be because this one's been sitting in the bottle a little bit longer, but it's I think it suits it. I do like how that goes together. In terms of the mouthfeel then, what would we say about this? I mean, I would say this is a pretty full-bodied beer. The carbonation is very smooth. It does have a really nice sort of it does have a really nice kind of oily character to it, like I said, but at the same time the overall feel of the beer for me is quite smooth and quite yeasty in a sense. So yeah, malty side of the beer, I would say very, very smooth, quite yeasty, but a good little bit of brown sugar. You've got some of the dryness from the peat and other things coming into it as well, like a dry toasty bread crusty sort of note, which is really interesting. The hoppy side of the beer, this one is not very bitter at all, to be quite honest with you. I'd say it's you get a little bit of bitterness, I think, from the malts in this one, so maybe at most it's about 25 or 30 IBUs. And as I said earlier, you've got a lovely balance of fruit in this one. I really like how this beer goes together from that perspective as well. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me, this beer. I really, really like it. So yeah, this has definitely been a very good first impression of Estonian Scotch ales, although like I said, I did try one from Pojala a little bit earlier on, and you will see that beer reviewed later on the channel at some stage. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Duncan Scotch ale with a little bit of peat in it from Anderson's Craft Brewery. Originally a gypsy brewery, as I said, now based in Tartu in the southeast of Estonia. At 7.3%, this one, for a 7.3%er, it packs a hell of a punch, but it's actually a little bit more. I would describe this beer as more of a 160 shilling actually. If you like the 160 shilling from Tracker House Brewery, this one is a lot closer to that than it is for some of the for some of the 90 shilling beers and stuff. So yeah, I really like how that goes together. So yeah, big thumbs up to Anderson's Craft Brewery for this one, and I do hope that I can try a few more beers from these guys at some point in the future. I'll need to see when I will get back to Estonia, but yeah, that's it for just now. But yeah, thank you again for watching my watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Anderson's Craft Beer. And we will return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. But yeah, until the next time, Slange Slow, and I'll catch you guys there. This was an awesome beer, and as I said earlier, if you do get the chance to check out some Estonian beers, I would highly, highly recommend that you do. Slange, Skull, cheers, Terva 6.